Well, Louis Roden, it's happy to have you here. It's great that we managed to find the time. And so we're flying now from Vienna, Austria to California. And it's great to have you here with us. Ludwig, Louis en français. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add something in Chinese. I don't know it, or in Russian.
No, those are all good, my friend. Those are all fantastic. First of all, let me begin by saying I love Vienna. It's one of my favorite cities. Um, love the holiday markets, the Christmas market there. The Bristol in Vienna is one of my clients, so I love to visit Simona there, the GM, who I've known for years. She's just fantastic. So happy to join you. By all means, let me share a little bit about ICG and what we've done and what we do. It all began in 2008, my friend. I was an executive at Starwood Hotels and Resorts. I headed up a team within the organizational capability department that did global leadership training and development for Starwood Hotels, long before the Marriott acquisition of Starwood. And decided to start my own organization, my own company. And it was a little scary. That was in 2008. So that was after the big real estate crash in North America, which rattled a lot of people around the world, a lot of hotels around the world as well. So we started slow, focusing on really two components: leadership training and development for hotels, specifically for hospitality and hotels at that point. Right? We've branched out a little bit since then, but that's still largely our focus. Service culture as well, service culture identification and communication, right? What does a team represent? What does the hotel want to be known for? Even if it's one or part of one of the larger brands, we also know that really the local team sets the team for the hotel, despite what the flag is out front. So helping a team identify and communicate that. And then service excellence as well, making sure that the hotel team is hitting on all spots to deliver intuitive service in an excellent fashion. So we started off slow with just a couple of hotels. Again, Alejandro, those first few years were a bit dodgy, as our British friends say, but began to grow from there. And now we're in our 15th year. Our 15-year anniversary is this September. And it's been very, very exciting working with some of the major flags around the world, some of the bigger, larger hotel groups, some mid-sized hotel groups, all the way down to specific hotel teams as well. And we've done a lot of work with a lot of food and beverage operations also. So it's been exciting to see. And we had great growth and things were going fantastic. And then it's funny, Alejandro, in December of 2019, I was working in Wuhan, China. Everybody knows what happened in Wuhan that same month. And then went and worked with hotels in Chongqing and Chengdu and Changsha, and ended up in Shanghai before the holiday, thinking 2020 is going to be just a great year. And we all know what happened in 2020 with COVID. And I remember working with a client in the Philippines in February, and I was to return to Hong Kong to do a debrief. And they said, Louis, you better go home because this is something big. And then, of course, the whole world stopped. And it really rocked hospitality. We all know that. So, one of the things that, my organization did is, look, hotel teams are in a lot of pain right now. Nobody has any money for anything. Most of these hotels were closed with just a GM and maybe a security guard. So, let's do what we can to help hotel teams get through this stuff. And we don't expect to be paid. We just want to give back, right? Because every hotel company and every hotelier knew what the challenges were. So we stayed involved. I guess that's the message. How do you work through this madness? We always say when we did all our programs before, Alejandro, it's easy to lead in the sunlight. When your hotel's full, when rate is strong, where, all these things are going great, your staff is good, your staff is solid. It's easy to lead that, right? It's harder to lead in the darkness. You've got to lead people through challenge. And we always train that. But again, we even train that in an environment of plenty. We didn't train it in an environment of difficulty. So we wanted to look back and say, all this great training that we didn't matter, right? What are people doing? to help people get through these periods, because we always said when I was in the military, you can't manage people into battle. You have to lead people to battle. And it's the same thing in a circumstance like this. You couldn't manage your way through all the emotional conflict that COVID presented. You had to lead people through that. So when people would ask the GM of the hotel or the regional VP or anybody, what's going to happen next, boss? Right? Because what we found, Alejandro, is a lot of leaders made promises, well-intended promises that they just couldn't keep. Right? I promise this will be over by spring. Right? I promise we're not going to close another outlet. I promise there won't be another reduction. And we made promises that we couldn't keep. And again, we didn't mean to make a promise we couldn't keep, right? But we did anyways. So what did we do about that, right? Leaders had to come back and be able to refocus themselves and refocus their teams and be comfortable with the unknown, right? Be comfortable with ambiguity. So when people would say, hey, boss, what happens next? And I get that leaders in the hospitality environment want to have answers to difficult questions. But in reality, in those circumstances, my friend, the only right answer, the only true answer was, I don't know. I don't know, but we're going to go through it together, right? And that's when you realize that all those things that leaders had to build beforehand, right? Leaders had to build trust, right? Leaders had to demonstrate and maintain a respectful environment. I always challenge leaders when I say, do your people trust you? And if you say yes, how do you know that? How do you know they trust you? And what do you do actively, consistently to build trust? So there we were, Alejandro, with all these hotels that we've had the honor to work with in all 5 continents, right? From every place in North America to throughout Asia Pacific, the Middle East, Europe, North Africa, you name it, right? All these leaders facing the same kind of challenge and the same kind of circumstance. And I think that leaders that understood some of these foundational things that we talked about when we founded the company, and even we talked about in the old days of some of these programs that we did at Starwood, was that leadership is personal, right? It's not lonely at the top. That old thing of it's lonely at the top to be a leader. No, it's not. It's only lonely if you make it lonely, right? You lead by consensus, right? You lead as a server to others, right? And leaders that found themselves in an environment of angst and difficulty, whether during COVID or any time, during SARS, during any reduction in force, during any natural disaster, it doesn't matter. When leadership finds themselves in those situations of difficulty, they've got to understand that they've got to lean on the relationships that they've developed and they've built throughout their careers. This old idea, my friend, of it's business, it's not personal, that's nonsense. Everything's personal, especially business. We try to reinforce that idea that, especially in hospitality, Alejandro, excuse me if I get animated, but I mean this stuff from the heart, that, in hospitality, we spend 80% of our waking lives doing what we do at work, because I don't count sleeping as being at home, because I'm unconscious. So that doesn't count. 80% of your life, anybody telling you that 80% of your life is not personal, it's business, that's nonsense, right? That's just, it's not about taking things personally. That's different. It's about understanding that my job at risk during COVID was personal, right? My inability to feed my family through my career is personal. All those things are personal. So when I heard about hotel teams coming together, right, holding potlucks and food banks for team members that didn't have the wherewithal to support their families, right? Finding whatever state assistance was available for their people. And, every country had something, right? We had it in North America. I know they had it in the EU. They had and some of them were adequate and some of them weren't. And then what corporate teams were doing in order to help rank and file associates. And what was the leadership team doing to really make sure that that was forward, so nobody was forgotten and nobody was left behind, because it lingered, my friend. This had never happened before in our industry. Hotels had to lead through crisis for sure, whether it was a reactor meltdown in Tokyo or a tsunami in Phuket or a terrorist attack in Paris, right? We all had to lead through those awful, but let's face it, time constrained disasters, right? This went on for years, right? So this kind of navigation through this kind of time period really set the difference between what a leader was going to be able to do or not do after the smoke cleared, right? You know, we always say in our business, as big as hospitality is, my friend, we know somebody who knows somebody else. You know, they say 6 degrees of separation. In hospitality, we're maybe 2 or 3 degrees. You know people that I know, and we've never met in person before. You know, I met a chef, a sous chef when we did the grand opening for the Ritz-Carlton in Baku in Azerbaijan. I met a sous chef who knew a chef that I knew, and I'd never been to Baku or met this guy before in my life. You know, that's how small our world is. So again, the leaders that demonstrated true kindness, right? True heart, right? Revealed themselves, you know, that we're all in the same boat, you know, allowed cracks in their armor to show, and we're human. You know, the biggest thing we needed through COVID, my friend, and I don't want to make this podcast be all about just COVID, but, you know, we needed to reveal our humanity. We need to demonstrate our humanity, right? We had to put our command and control inclination as leaders to the side, right? And just be real and be genuine. I know that there were GMs that led hotels that didn't see their families for years, especially in Asia Pacific, where these people couldn't leave the countries that they were, right? Other things like the immigration crisis in Europe was only exacerbated by COVID and made things worse by COVID. You know, all those things challenged us as hoteliers. How do we retain our people now? How do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them focused, right? Will our people come back? You know, all of a sudden the guests, you know, revenge travel started again. You know, guests started coming back, and guests were different. Guests had different expectations, different challenges. A lot of people said, boy, guests seemed angrier or more anxious or more desperate or more this or more that. How do we deal with that, right? What we like to think is one of the things that we wanted to provide for our constituency, right? Whether they were current clients, new clients, it didn't matter, was how can you be nimble in that regard? You know, and look, I was part of a big machine at Starwood as well. Big hotel companies have large L&D functions and facilities, right? It's almost like a university kind of a big effort, but those tend not to be nimble tools. You know, those tend not to be things of, well, that's great. I'm glad we've got this academy or that academy, but I've got something facing today, now, in my particular hotel, in my particular market, in my particular region, that I'm struggling to deal with, and maybe, you know, the larger university can't help with, right? So being able to fill those niches wherever we can has been a joy, really. It's been because we're all hoteliers that work for my organization with various levels of experience in operations, in HR and L&D. You know, so when you're hoteliers yourself, I think we have that unique perspective in that you can say, look, I understand what you're going through. I understand what you're feeling, and it's not just words. It's actually viable. Right?
Luis, how would you define leadership? What would be examples to like enforce, to increment, to empower to leadership? And you also mentioned during the pandemic that we should have showed a little bit more humanity, that it was like a necessity, no? It was not only about COVID. What would you say about these topics?
Well, leadership, I think leadership begins and ends with relationships, right? Full stop. All the data demonstrates and shows that the largest driver of a leader's success is a leader's ability to develop relationships with others. And one of the biggest drivers of a leader's struggle or failure is their inability to do these things, right? Because it's the same thing, my friend, in the guest service environment, that when guests tell stories about a hotel, they're generally compelling stories, stories that drive loyalty, guest loyalty. They're telling stories about people, right? Yes, if you stay at a beautiful resort, if you stay at the Bristol in Vienna, right? If you stay at the Imperial in Vienna, if you stay at, Four Seasons, but you fill in the blank. If you stay at a beautiful hotel, they're generally not talking about, they'll say, yeah, the hotel was beautiful. That's it, right? Or they'll stay at a resort and it's a beautiful sunset, it's a beautiful beach. But they tell stories about the people that they met and the way this person interacted or that person interacted. That's where guest loyalty lives, right? It's not about the hardware. So same thing in a hotel environment. When you talk to people, and when people say, if you ask somebody in a hotel, whether it's a banquet server, bartender, front desk agent, it doesn't matter. If you ask them if they like their job and they say yes, they're talking about their coworkers and they're talking about their boss, right? No front desk agent is saying, I love my job because this is the best front desk I've ever had. Or a banquet guy saying, these are the best banquet chairs I've ever had. It's not about the hardware, right? So all those things stem to leadership, right? And that stems to the relationships that leadership make the effort to build with their people. Not just their direct reports, not with just their executive teams, with their department heads, with everybody, right? And it comes back again, my friend, to trust, respect, communication, right? All those things are main components of relationships. Any relationships, right? You want a great relationship with your significant other? You better have trust. You better demonstrate respect, and you better communicate well, or it's not going to go well. You want to be a great father or a great mother, right? Kids better trust you. You better demonstrate respect to each other. You better communicate well. Those are the same tools. It's the same thing in the relationships we have to develop at work. Because if people are loyal to their leader, they're not loyal because of their demonstrated authority. They're not loyal for only their ability. Now, look, a leader has to do all these other things. We have to make good decisions, right? We have to be profit driven, right? You can't just be a leader and be a great relationship builder, but not deliver on the bottom line. Because if you are, you might be a great guy at a cocktail party, but somebody's going to fire you because you can't, we're in a for-profit business. I get that, right? Because we divide it into two sections, Alejandro, right? What a leader has to get done, there's impeccable execution, and then there's emotional connection. That's what makes a leader credible. So you can execute impeccably, right? You can collaborate, you can change, you can innovate, you can process improve, and you can deliver on the EBITDA number or the RevPAR number or whatever you're expected to deliver. You got to do that. But you can't do that and destroy people while you do it, right? That's the emotional connection piece. That connection piece, your ability to be emotionally intelligent, right? To develop relationships with others, to train and develop and truly lead by example and transfer your competency to others and develop the people around you. You get both those things together, loyalty is driven across any enterprise. And that's when people will follow you. When they say, oh, I'm leaving, I'm going to a new hotel, and they say, boss, we want to come with you. And you say, you don't even know where I'm going yet. They say, I don't care because you're the best boss I've ever had, right? All those things aren't about your ability to put together a great PowerPoint or do a great spreadsheet or just make the numbers dance, right? It's about the way you engage and involve yourself. Right?
And how can you transmit it or also practice it in practical workshops in your work, for example, with the Inspire group? No, for example,
that's what we talk about.
TMs.
Yeah, when we work with, whether it's a hotel team, GM, a GM, a regional team, we start on talking about those base fundamentals, right? Of how do we really build trust? Because we let what we let happen, Alejandro, is we just hope trust evolves by action. We hope it arrives organically. And some leaders will say, well, hey, I know people trust me because I do what I say I'm going to do, right? I show up on time, right? I keep my word, right? All those things are important. Those things, my challenge is those things make you reliable. They don't necessarily make you trustworthy, right? Because trust, being reliable is rooted in action and intellect, right? Being trustworthy is rooted in emotion and heart. So what can we do as leaders to actively, not passively, right? Actively develop and grow and nurture that level of trustworthiness. And then part and parcel to that, we talk about, especially with new teams, when we work with new teams, is talk about how we demonstrate respect actively, right? And I like to believe no leaders are out there intentionally doing anything disrespectful, right? They're just not, right? But when you put something like respect and the demonstration of respect front of mind, so it's active. When you put being trustworthy and developing trust active, right? And leadership teams sit around and talk about these things. How do we demonstrate trust to our people? How do we demonstrate respect, right? And not just 1 week a year on housekeeping week, right? Or 1 day a year to honor the engineers in the building. Yay, we all get them up front, we give them a bowl of ice cream. I'm not talking about that BS. All those are nice things, right? But those things are props, I think, right? The right thing is how do we make trust and respect a part of who we are? So that's some of the things that we talk about with teams. I don't want to give away the ghost and tell you exactly how we do it, right? But those are some of the things that we talk about, right? Predicated on the format of leadership is personal and the work environment is personal, right? We also predicate it on a second foundation, is flipping around and changing the golden rule that many of us are raised with, especially in the West. Many of us are raised with the idea of treat others the way you want to be treated. And a lot of people say, I treat everybody the way I want to be treated. And I get the premise of where that comes from, but we turn that around, that it's a little self-centered to think that everybody wants to be treated the way you want to be treated. That makes you the center of the relationship. You got to turn that around. I can't treat you the way I want to be treated, my friend. I got to treat you the way you want to be treated. And as a leader, as I develop the relationship with you, I understand how you want me to be, how you want me to interact with you, how you want me to communicate with you, right? Because, for example, I'm an extrovert. I know you probably find that very surprising, but I'm
difficult to find out.
But if you're an extroverted leader, but you have introverts on your team, and you just come at them with this intensity and this extroversion, you're going to lose because they don't want to be treated like that, right? If you're predominantly an intellectual and a thinker, but you have feelers on your team, if you have people on your team that make decisions but with their heart more than their head, and you only come at them with intellect, you're probably not going to get through to them either, right? Leaders have to be great chameleons. Some leaders have challenged me, and I get it, when they've said, well, that just means I'm being fake. I said, it's not being fake. It's being a servant leader. It's you as a leader asking yourself every day, what do my people need me to be today, right? And leaders that I've worked with, like Torsten Richter, like Torsten Richter, who I know that you know. Okay. I don't know if I can name names here. There was Carlson, right? Like Tino Linder at the JW in Frankfurt, right? Like Simona there at, these people are heart-based, and they're tough leaders. People think, oh, if I'm a heart-based leader, that means I'm not tough. Those gentlemen are tough. Simone at the Bristol is tough. Make no mistake, right? But just because you're a tough leader, you have high expectations and you expect high delivery. That does not mean that you don't understand the emotions and the relationships that are in play. In fact, when you ask most people who's the best leader you've ever had, and they get somebody in their mind, and then you ask them, were they easy on you? Did they have a low bar for your performance? No, they had a high bar for your performance, right? They had high expectations of what they wanted for you, but it's the way they interacted with you. They pushed you just when you needed pushed, and they stopped pushing at the right time. They told you the tough feedback that you needed to hear in a way that you understood it and accepted it, right? They never made you feel stupid. They always made you feel valued, right? And they had high expectations, right? And they understand at the end of the day, that their ability to nurture and build, an appropriate relationship with you was key. The silver bullet of leadership is developing appropriate and real relationships. The silver bullet of team member retention, because right now, at post-COVID, we had hospitality bled people, and so many people sit around and they rub their foreheads, Alejandro. It's like, I can't keep people, I can't find people. The answer is leadership, and the answer is service culture and developing and investing in people, right? Those are the answers. It's not more money. It's not more. Look, we got to pay fair. We have to offer a fair package. All those things, though, are like the price of admission, right? It's funny how you see all this data, Alejandro, of anybody joining any organization, but I think especially in the hotel environment or the food and beverage environment, within the first 24 hours, they make the decision in their head of whether it was a good decision or a bad decision that they joined that organization. That's how important that first day is. And then within the first week, they'll make a decision whether they think this is a long-term or a short-term play, right? That's why that time period is so important. Yet all too often, those time periods are filled with paperwork, and process, and blah, 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 blah. And it's got all the warmth of going to the dentist, right? And helping organization to understand you're developing that relationship with that person minute one, not day one, minute one. You're building trust and demonstrating respect minute one. And when everybody's on the same page of doing that, you'll never have a retention problem again. And quite frankly, you'll never have a recruiting problem again, because you'll begin to get the reputation being known as a place where people want to come in, right? So, long answer to that. It's all about what are the leaders doing at the beginning to develop and nurture that relationship.
So what would be a good example or something practical for every leader or every person that is leading, actually, not only having a leadership title, to questions himself and ask, how can I be a better leader? How can I improve? Also, what you just told me, I think it's very interesting. Sure. About the first 24 hours when a new employee comes to the new hotel, for example.
Well, that self-awareness piece is key, right? Of leaders understanding, first of all, that none of us are done yet, right? None of us are finished. I love the old quote. I'm not sure who said it. It might have been Einstein, maybe. But if you stop learning, you're old. It doesn't matter if you're 20 or 80. You stop, you're old, right? And when anybody ever says, well, Lou, you're an expert at this, you're a leadership expert, I'm like, nope. I said I'm a student, right? I'm a learner, right? And every leader I work with, whether they're a new leader, right? Everybody carries a degree of wisdom, right? You can learn from anything. Bad examples, we learn from our bad examples, right? There's an old, there's a song here in the States that says, look, you can learn from crooks and heroes. You can learn from both, right? So having that constant mindset of I'm always learning, I always have an opportunity to explore, to be better at my craft, whatever that craft is, right? How do I improve? That's the first piece to self-awareness. I like also the quote that, the first step to wisdom is understanding that you don't have that much of it. And it all comes with time and process, right? And so when you put these things, again, front of mind, Alejandro, because often when we're leaders, especially executive teams in hotels, there's so much to do. I get it. You're literally running like a little mini city, right? And the GM is the mayor, right? And the director of security is the chief of police, right? And the HR director is the person, there's so many things to do. So it's difficult to keep these emotional things sometimes front of mind, right? Unless a leader, because it's easy to diary the management stuff we need to do, right? If I'm a department head, if I'm an F&B director or an engineer, right? Okay, I've got to do this ordering, right? I've got to, look at my food cost. I've got to do this. I've got to get the schedule out this week. We diary all those things. So they're in our agenda of things we have to get done. My challenge often to leaders is you got to diary leadership activities as well. And they look at me like, what? Right? Leadership doesn't happen by accident, right? So I tell young or old leaders, I say, look, put 20 minutes in your diary, maybe a half hour, right? And you're in your hotel or your corporate department, whatever the case may be, and say, look, I'm going to take this 20 minutes because everybody can spare that, and say, there's somebody here in the building today that I don't know that well, right? Whether it's a new person, a person in a different department or different function, I'm going to go out and introduce myself. Because I always say, as a senior team, people know who you are. If you're the director of sales and marketing, if you're the director of engineering, executive chef, director of finance, they know you and your business card. That's it. Other than that, you're a mystery, unless you have a good or bad reputation at the hotel, right? When you go out and say, hi, I'm sorry, I haven't met you yet. My name's Louis. I'm the director of finance. Welcome to the team. And I shake my hand. I go out and shake your hand. Not because HR told you to come to an orientation, right? Not because there's some formal, new employee luncheon once a month. I'm not talking about that BS. I'm talking about being genuine and really going out there and taking a little bit of your time to go out and that's the first step to building trust and showing respect. But you got to diary the time, Alejandro, or you won't do it. If people don't take the time to actually go out and do it, that's one piece. The other piece is everybody talks by lead by example, right? And it's funny, I work with a restaurant group here in Southern Cal, right? And they operate these beautiful restaurants. And one of the managers told me, one of the problems is the people on the floor in the front of the house, they don't smile. They don't smile. And then I walk out on the floor one night and there's the manager and he's like this, right? I said, look, brother, you want people to smile? You smile, right? It can't be this attitude of don't do as I do as I say. So that other opportunity for leaders is take 15 minutes, take 20 minutes, and go out and not just develop relationships. That's the other idea. Second idea, go out and really demonstrate the behaviors that you want your people to demonstrate, right? So especially in the upper echelon of hotels and in the four-star and above, but this really applies to any environment, even select service hotels. If people go out and, again, not by accident, but purposefully diary the time to say, I'm going to go out and demonstrate these behaviors. Our hotel is focused on service and engaging the guests. So I'm going to go out and do it, right? And imagine people across roles doing that, right? Imagine that. You stay in hotels, right, Alejandro? You've stayed in hotels, many hotels. Yeah. Imagine being at breakfast, right? And somebody approaching you or having a cocktail with it, somebody approaching you and say, hell, my name's Louis. I'm the chief engineer here in the hotel. I just want to introduce myself and say, I hope you're having a wonderful stay. And if you're having any issues within your room or any of the environments at all within my authority, here's my card. Please reach out. That's probably never happened from a director of engineering, right? Or a director of finance approaching somebody at breakfast saying, how's your meal this morning? Great. Doesn't happen. In fact, I've laid that same example out to a head of a hotel, a GM of a hotel. Like, what if your director of HR was engaging guests at lunch about their guest experience or engaging guests anywhere within the hotel? They'd say, like, what? They must be drunk, right? It just doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? oh, that's just for the rooms people to do or sales people to do. No, if it's all our jobs, if we demonstrate it, imagine the front desk agent going, oh my God, there's people here from sales or whatever the case may be, engaging guests, not all the time, not an hour a day, not even a half hour a day, just the time that it takes for you to get from your car park to your office. Instead of trying to not be in the front of the house, that I know some people do, take another 5 minutes, go to the front of the house and just engage guests. Say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you have an opportunity, introduce yourself, say who you are. So then the guests go back, they get on TripAdvisor and say, can you believe the assistant chief engineer introduced themselves to me? Oh, why? Did you have a problem in your room? No, I had no problem at all. I just saw him in the hallway and he stopped and he introduced himself. That kind of stuff makes a difference. If you don't, and again, not everybody's going to do it. Not everybody's going to do it all the time. But if a few people, and it begins to be purposeful, it becomes part of your culture, right? Not just on an MOD shift or things like that, it becomes part of your culture. It's wildly, wildly impactful, you know, because part of the, and another thing that we like to talk about with leaders, and stop me if I'm going off track, Alejandro, is when we do engage with guests or we do engage with our staff, right? That communication piece is key in how we're engaging, and are we engaging the right way? And are we asking the right questions, right? Because and it's almost gospel in our business, right? Guest is checking out after a 4-night stay. Front desk agent says, was everything okay with your stay, sir? The guest, yeah, everything fine. Then goes home, gets on TripAdvisor, and writes us a terrible review. And everybody throws their hands up and says, I don't understand. I asked them if everything was okay with their stay. Is everything okay with your stay is the wrong question, right? So that's why the person then gets the TripAdvisor and lights them up. Same as a restaurant. Here comes the manager. Everything okay with your meal? Everything's fine. You get a bad Yelp review, bad advice, TripAdvisor. Is everything okay with your meal?
Hey, Luis, you were just in a flow. I didn't want to interrupt you, although I saw it's almost less than 1 minute. But if you like, just continue where you were with the example.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So the idea being that those are just the wrong questions, right? So how do we give, whether we're leaders or our team members, how do we give them the right tools to ask the right kinds of questions, right? And understanding that whatever our repertoire is on how we engage our team members or how we engage our guests are important, right? So, and again, just like I talked about trust between leaders and team members, you know, we got to start building trust with our guests at the very beginning, right? Because if guests trust you, they'll tell you the truth, right? So what do we do at the very beginning? We start in order to develop trust among our constituency, including our guests as well. So if we ask them the right kind of questions, open-ended questions that are encouraging feedback, encouraging dialogue, right? That when we do fall down, when there is an issue, then the guests will be more forthcoming, right? So only positive things do show up on TripAdvisor. It's the same thing with our associates. If you do an associate survey asking associates about whether they're happy in their work environment or not, if you're waiting for the results of the survey to find out your people are happy, it's too late, right? It's already post-survey. You know, you should be doing all those things in advance of this. I'm not saying don't do the survey, right? But same thing, if you're in a trusting environment, a trusting relationship, people will come to you and say, boss, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, right? I'm confused, right? I don't know what to do next, right? All that requires trust. Nobody's going to do that in an environment absent trust or respect. Same with guests, right? If I'm a guest and you only engage me transactionally throughout my stay, whether I'm a one-night business transient stay or I'm in your hotel for a 10-day holiday with my family, right? If you process me the whole time and treat me like a transaction, right? Then I don't owe you any trusting feedback back in my mind, right? Maybe unconsciously, subconsciously, but I don't owe you that. I'll do it through TripAdvisor. That's how I'll give you the feedback, right? So, but when we begin at the very beginning and get off the script, right, and develop and nurture those relationships with our guests, we always say, there's 4 parts of the whole experience, Alejandro, right? On how anybody experiences a hotel, a restaurant, a retail store, right? Place, process, product, and lastly, people, right? And the place is, how the place, looks, how it smells, what you hear, all those things, the product itself within, so if the place is the hotel, the product is the bed, the amenities, the pool, all those things. The process you put me through to get things done, whether it's check in, make a spa appointment, use the fitness center, whatever the case may be, right? And hotels work so hard on those 3. Yet the 4th one, the 4th P, the people component, that's what lets you win the game, right? That's where the magic is, right? And that's all the emotional based components that we're speaking about, right? So when you do follow up with a guest, whether there's been a problem or not been a problem, right? But if you approach a guest and you made an effort over their 4-day stay to develop and build that trust, and you notice things, one of the components that we do as well is we do trained observation pieces, right? In order for front of house staff and even back of house staff to be trained observers, because most people aren't good observers. They always talk about, oh, we have an eyewitness. Eyewitness testimony is the least reliable, not the most reliable, because we both see something and we both see something different, right? But if a front desk agent has that lens on, that active lens of, am I a good observer? Am I a trained observer? And same with leaders, because we have to observe our people the same way, right? Who's happy? Who's sad? Who's on their game? Who's rested? Who's not rested? Who's exhausted? Who's worried? Who's concerned, right? All those things. And when you're a good observer combined with trust and respect, like I said before. So if you're a great observer and you come to me, say you're a front desk manager, and you come to me because I'm normally cheery and positive, and you can tell I'm off my game today, right? I'm sad, I'm not smiling. If you come to me and say, hey, Alejandro, are you okay? You seem like you're a little off today. If I trust you, I'll tell you. If I don't trust you, or not even distrust you, if you haven't actively built trust with me, everything's fine, boss. I'm okay. Even when I'm not okay, right? But so combining that effort as well, like are we good observers, right? Can we look at what's going on in our restaurant with our guests and observe and notice things and respond to those things accordingly, right? Can we look at our pool deck? Can we look at our front desk area, our lobby area, right? Can we observe and understand and see things that are going on, right? Because generally as people, we're not good observers, right? We're not, right? So, and quite frankly, Alejandro, I took skills from my past life, and we morphed those into the hospitality environment and helping people be better observers, right? So that's the other component as well, because that's the magic in service, observing what I need before I ask. And that's part of the magic in leadership too, right? Doing something positive for the guest before they ask. You know what, my friend, that's the magic, again, in our personal relationship. If your best friend does something for you without you asking, right? Like say you casually mention, yeah, I got a busy weekend ahead. I'm going to move a bunch of stuff in my house, right? And you just turn up and say, I'm here to help, right? They'll be like, what? You got to move a sofa or something. I'm just here to help. But here's what we normally do. Oh, do you need any help? And we usually say, no, it's fine. I've got it, right? Just do it without asking, right? Like I say in our interpersonal relationship, like here in the States, it's a big deal around Valentine's Day, right? And in a lot of other parts of the world, Valentine's Day is a big deal. So you get your significant other flowers on Valentine's Day. Well, you better. It's Valentine's Day. You're supposed to give them flowers on Valentine's Day, right? What if you just get flowers on some random Tuesday in some random month? And you bring them to your partner and say, I was thinking about it. Aren't those better flowers than the ones that you're expected to give, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing in leadership, right? Doing all the things that you're supposed to do, that you're expected to do. Employee of the month, employee of the year, blah, blah, blah. Again, all those things are great, right? There's no substitute for that moment when a leader, any leader, not necessarily just your boss, because they're a trained observer, they're a good observer, and because they want to develop and nurture relationships, and they want to demonstrate respect. So those all live together. Notice you having a great interaction with a guest, right? Whether it's a check-in, whether it's a guest asking, has the map of like, where do I go to get to this place? And, and you see a great interaction and somebody stops by saying, hey, I just witnessed that interaction you had with the guest. That was fantastic. You answered their questions. You made other recommendations. Thank you for engaging like that. That was great, right? That's it. But generally we walk by those things, we don't even notice, right? But go ahead, please.
What would you recommend to train or exercise our observation skills better? For example, concrete exercises, because you, I think, said we cannot really observe. No, most of the people are not very good observers.
One of the things I tell people, I ask people to do to begin, to start off, Alejandro, I always say, turn down the noise in your head, right? Because everybody has that noise. I always make the joke, everybody has a voice in their head, right? Now, if you have more than one voice, you have to go to HR and ask for it. But we all have the one voice in our head, and it's loud. It's loud sometimes, right? It makes so we're constantly thinking about that. And when you turn that down a little bit, right? And I would say, take a moment, whether even when you're off duty, go to somebody else's hotel, sit in the lobby, turn down the noise in your head, and just watch, right? Just watch people, right? Watch guests move in and out, right? And try to and play a little game with yourself, right? And start off with, who might be a business traveler, who's likely a leisure traveler, right? Who's frustrated because they've been in queue too long, just because you're observing the queue, right? All these kinds of things. Who's tired, right? That person is checking in. They've got a bunch of luggage. It's on a bell cart. They've got 2 little kids in tow, right? So you just start making observations. Then you observe the staff. Who's smiling, right? Who's transacting quickly, but showing no emotion engagement, right? Who's being friendly? Who's in the lobby? What leaders are in the lobby, right? Who's engaging? And you begin to practice your observation skills, right? And the more you, like anything else, if you practice it, you get better at it, right? You get better at it. And not just with guests, leaders in the hotel itself, right? Who's engaged at your pre-shift meetings? Who's making eye contact? Who's acknowledging, right? Who's disengaged and who's aloof, right? Who's always eating by themselves in the canteen, right? Versus who's eating within a group. Now, I'm not saying you take action on every bit of this data. What I'm saying is you become a good observer and you collect this data, right? Because you can't action all of it. You just begin to observe and understand it all, right? So when you're walking by your lobby and you see guests celebrating something, because there's a bottle of champagne or whatever the case may be on the table, and they're toasting, right? You stop by and say, ladies and gentlemen, I don't mean to interrupt. I can see you're having a great time. It's a celebration. My name's Louis. I'm the director of HR here in the hotel. I'd love to know what you're celebrating. Oh, we're celebrating Thomas's promotion or Sarah's engagement, or who knows what it is. Congratulations. That's wonderful. You don't have to comp anything. If you can, that's great as well. Congratulations. Thank you for celebrating here in our lobby, right? We're thankful to have you here in the hotel. You just notice, right? Again, power of observation. You just notice, right? That's all you need to do. By practicing those observation skills, and we do a great little program where we use live hotel examples about this is what occurred. What did you see? And how would you action what you saw? But I get it, Alejandro, we get caught up in the transaction, right? Front desk agents are all about speed of check-in and getting the queue down, bellmen are about getting those bags to the room, boom, boom, boom. And what we have to, and look, all those transactions, that's that process. When I talked about the 4 Ps, right? That process is key. The ability to infuse that process with humanity and the people piece, right? Is at levels of organizations. And then I've stayed, my friend, at some of the finest 5-star, 5-diamond resorts in the world and been treated like a transaction from the beginning to the end. And I have stayed at some humble hotels that have treated me truly, intuitively like a guest from the beginning, right? It's not about where you're at on the money spend, on the place and the product, right? You know, again, I like this example. I always use this with groups, and they always smile and nod in acknowledgement. You can meet a handsome man or a beautiful woman, and in 5 minutes, they're ugly as soon as you get to know them. And everybody knows the example, right? That they're pretty on the outside or handsome on the outside. Then you get to know them, and they're like, oh, they're not so pretty after all. Hotel can be the same way. Restaurant can be the same way. You walk in, it's gorgeous. The food is brilliant. The process is efficient. If the people are emotionally not attractive, for lack of a better term. I mean, if they're ugly, it's even worse. But if they're neutral, right? If they're forgettable, right? And that's the biggest thing haunting us in leadership and service. It's no longer just bad service. I don't think there's anybody being bad to anybody. I don't think there's anybody walking into a restaurant or a hotel or a pub and anybody saying, who the hell are you? Get the hell out of here. I mean, there's not anybody, I hope, knock on wood, that does that. The biggest thing haunting us is neutral service, right? Gray service, forgettable service. Yeah, it's forgettable. I'm not angry, nor am I happy. I leave, and the minute I leave, I forget you. You know what, my friend? The same thing haunts us in leadership, gray leadership. You come in, you do your work, you do the schedule, you do your pre-shift, I just pulled my head. You just mark time. That's all you're doing is marking time. So bad leaders, are they still out there? There's still some out there, right? But the biggest part of the bell curve are the gray lead. They don't build loyalty. They don't erode loyalty. They don't build loyalty. So when it comes time for somebody to leave, because they get recruited by another organization for another couple €1,000 a year, right? At that moment of truth, always comes down to loyalty, my friend. Always. So if they say, yeah, I'm leaving because it's another 3,000, 4,000 euros a year, that means you didn't build loyalty to that person. Because when people say, no, I'm happy where I'm at, that's because there's a team and there's a boss that they're loyal to. And that loyalty is rooted in those things we just talked about. Developing that relationship, trust, respect, and you as the boss, being able to observe my moods, my feeling, my spirit, and you treating me the way I want to be treated, right? Not the way that you want to treat me. And that's where the money is. But my friend, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? Yeah. Again, you've got to put things in play that put those things front of mind so people actively practice these things. Because when you practice it, you do it. But people don't think about practicing leadership. They think about practicing PowerPoint, or they think about, that side of the brain. They don't think about the leadership side. Because this idea that, well, you're either a born leader or not is nonsense, right? Some people may be more inclined to lead because of their personalities, but anybody can improve on themselves as a leader. And if you work on yourself as a leader, because some of the things that we talked about, again, they impact every part of our lives. All those things impact our personal relationships and our work relationships. If you work on yourself as a leader and you want to be a better leader, that makes you a better friend, a better spouse, a better partner, a better son, a better father, a better neighbor. It's a 360. It's a 360. And anybody saying that it's soft is nonsense. This is the hard stuff, right?
Well, Luis, I think you have been to more hotels than myself, although I have traveled quite a lot too. But I agree totally that I think there's still a lot work to do. with everyone, or almost everyone can improve. And you just mentioned also something about past lives. Did I heard it correct? That you
Well, not
said
past,
you were,
well, just
or,
that, well, only past lives in my past experience, my friend, not actually past, yeah, but my
yeah,
past, you know,
what do you mean with that? I didn't
well, I'm not
understand
a
it.
hotelier by birth, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people worked in their hotels their whole lives, right? I got into the hotel business by accident, right? I spent some time in the military first, and then following that, I worked with different organizations that had nothing to do with hospitality. I worked in international air freight and ocean freight. I worked in retailing. I worked in financial services. Um, and none of those have anything to do with hospitality, right? It's um, and a lot of those environments were difficult, were a challenge, were very transactional environments, especially financial services. I won't name the companies that I worked with. That's probably
Yeah.
not a problem. You'd recognize the names, most of them. They were great experiences. All of them had different leadership challenges that we had to face. But when I came in and joined at Starwood, right, I came in at a director level. And one of the things my boss told me is, you've got to learn our business first. And it was remarkable spending time in all the departments in a hotel, in housekeeping, in engineering, in sales and marketing, in HR, and understanding how incredible this lifestyle is that we choose. I realized that all my jobs before, my friends, with probably the exception of the military, were jobs. They weren't lifestyle. It wasn't a lifestyle choice. I tell anybody coming into hospitality, hospitality is a lifestyle choice. If you want a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and always leave work at home, hospitality is probably not a good choice. Not if you want to grow your career, right? Not if you want to grow, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't have work-life balance. That's the other thing we work on organizations with, is really redefining hours at work, and what we have to do in how we re-engineer some of our jobs to make sure that the people do have balance. But again, balance is about making sure that you create a work environment where people can blossom and people can be successful and people can be happy. You blur the lines between work and home when people are happy in both places, not just one of the two, right? So I think I took a lot of great things from my past employers, and I left a lot of bad things behind, right? But coming into hospitality, and now it's been, again, I've been in this business for 20 some odd plus years now. It really is a special place because we're in the business of delighting people. That's what we are. I don't care if your guest is business, transient, or leisure. At the end of the day, it's not about just the beds and the showers, and we're in the business of delighting people, which is pretty cool, right? It's better to do that than be in the business of, be in the prison business, or and all those other business are necessary, right? If you're in the medical field and you're in the business of saving people or curing people, that's noble, right? But if you're in the business field about growing things and making things successful, that's a noble effort as well, right? But when you're in the art side, and I include hospitality in the art side because we're about delighting people, right? Sure, if we have an opportunity to save a life, we'll do it. I'm sure, right? Or all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, right, we want our guests to leave, whether they're having just a brunch with us or they're staying with us, right? We want them to leave feeling better about themselves and their experience, not worse. And same to people that come and work with us, engage us in that, right? And again, that's all delivered through leadership. So coming on board with Starwood and now being able to work with so many great hotels around the world and great brands, small and large both, and develop programs for high potential people, like we did in Asia Pacific for Marriott, right, corporately. Like we've done these great fundamental grassroots guest experience programs that we just did with the Meriton Suites in Australia, right? So doing some larger programs with IHG around the world have just been fantastic. I mean, it's been a gift to do it. But then also just working with particular hotel teams, right? So when you step away from the larger brand vision and just talk about what matters to that team, you know, that's just been a unique opportunity to do, not just since ICG, but some of the things that we did in Starwood, right? I am honored and delighted to say that I've made friends all over the world because of these interactions. Because it's back to developing relationships again, right? My clients are my friends are my clients, right? And never had that backfire on me, my friend, not yet, you know, which I think is,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I said I've never had that backfire. So it's and it comes back to that adage that I mentioned earlier in our conversation, that everything's personal, right? And it's not that you don't make tough business decisions, make tough calls. We all do all those hard things, right? But anybody saying that you can do that with only emotion and not intellect, or only intellect and not emotion, they just don't understand the way the human brain works. Right?
That's true.
When people say we got to take the emotion out of it, it's like, well, that would take surgery or a lot of medication. Right? It's one thing you're saying you don't want to make a purely emotional decision. Even saying you want to take the emotion out of something is an emotional decision, right? So, and just accepting and taking responsibility for the fact that all those things come into play together. You know, that's what's
well, Luis, now you have also a friend in Vienna or wherever I am. And I think all these past lives of yours have given you a very interesting perspective. I'm sure that the people that are listening or that will be listening, they have learned quite a lot. It's really very good exercises you gave me also personally. And the observation, the emotion, really excellent. And I think also what do you think, before we come to the end, I have some very short, maybe funny questions. Well, wouldn't you agree that because you said it's not hospitality is maybe different than military, than retail, than financial services, etc. But at the end, isn't it? It's also always about the persons. No, it's a business about people. I guess at the military you have also to deal with people, with the emotions, not only the ratio.
Oh, certainly.
So yeah, you have the experience. No, I just think, but I haven't experienced it.
Yeah, but it's people understanding that and accepting that those things are in play. But in a lot of those environments, they either don't honor those realities, right? Or they don't accept them. You know, you're absolutely right. The fact of the matter is that relationships drive everything. Absolutely everything, right? And positive relationships, right? Even if you begin to form a positive relationship with the policeman that pulls your car over, right? If you make that not an adversarial relationship from the beginning, but a positive, doesn't mean you're not going to get a citation, right? But it'll matter, right? So that's the lens, and it's not about being happy every day, being smiley every day. You know, it's about being in great command of your emotions. It's about self-management. All those things are big components about relationships as well. And you're right, every industry, right? If they would work on their emotional intelligence, if they would work on their self-management and their ability to develop relationships with others, right? All those components, there's not an industry out there that wouldn't be better off, my friend. Not one. I don't even in the environment where somebody's just making widgets on an assembly line, right? Even that person wants a boss that gives a damn, right? So absolutely, in any environment, it plays out importantly. But again, when you're in the business of delighting people, whether you're going to Disneyland or Legoland or Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, which we had the honor to work for, those areas where people expect to be entertained, you better understand these things. You need to understand these things, right? In the hospitality environment, where again, regardless of why anybody's staying in our hotel or dining in our restaurants, we in order to be successful, we need to have that same, for sure.
Well, Luis, before we finish, I would just have some very short questions, and you just have to answer me like spontaneously
Yes or no?
without thinking too much. So not only the
Okay,
rational, but rather the emotions. And I hope you
sure.
can, if you cannot name some names, or if you don't want to make some marketing for several companies, I don't know, it's okay. But for example, if I would ask you, because you have traveled and stayed in so many also great hotels, etc., if I would ask you, like your top three hotels in the world, could you say something,
Oh,
or you
that's
don't want
hard.
to?
You're right.
Okay.
That would be hard because I would end up alienating the ones that I don't list in that group, right?
Yeah.
So, uh, and everybody, all of them bring something special, right? Uh, um, I'll just draw on some most recent
Yeah.
experiences, right?
Yeah.
Um, Working with the two Anantaras in Oman, right? There's two Anantara resorts in Oman. Um, that have lovely teams that lead both these hotels. They're beautiful. It was my first trip to Oman. I'm not saying they're above any other hotels that I work with, right? But just the experience there, the physical location and the people in them were fantastic. You know, uh, helping open the Ritz-Carlton in Baku and staying at the JW and the Ritz-Carlton in Baku. Again, never been to Azerbaijan before. The Azerbaijani, all the local people, delightful, wonderful. You see the common theme here, my friend. It's always about the people. Always. I always love going back to Vienna, right? So many places in Asia. We did a program at the Intercontinental in Ho Chi Minh, which was delightful. And so it's hard to say top three. When people say, where are your top places, or your top destination, I always kind of rely on what happened the last 90 days because there's so much travel. So long story short, I'm sorry, that's a political answer, but it's hard for me to say the top three. I really could.
You should have a journal or something, like a diary where you.
Oh, I do. I have a
You
big
have
diary.
one. That would
And
be
I've got,
interesting to read.
yeah, you see our conference room, everything that's on the walls, right? It's every place has been a gift. Every place, I've again tried to form relationships and learn about local culture. You can't learn from the rim. You got to be front and center. You got to be in the middle, right? So I remember being on the beach, playing beach games with the local staff, with a few hotels in Langkawi in Malaysia, and it was just delightful, right? Or sharing local meals with the people that work in the hotel in Thailand and Vietnam, right? About volunteering at a soup kitchen with the Sheraton in where was it? Bratislava in Slovakia,
Okay.
right? So all these experiences have made something different and better and special. So
Well, I still have like 9 questions, and we have
go.
less than 9 minutes. So, how many days a year you travel?
Now, probably, I would say about 50% of the time I'm on the road.
Wow.
It used to be more. It used to be about 75, 80%. Now it's about 50%.
What does your better half of you say about this?
Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not.
Okay.
When she has the advantage to come along, it's fantastic. And when she doesn't, sometimes it's a stress. But that always applies. When my children were little, it was harder. Now Alejandro, my two sons are grown up, and my younger son works for my company, so I see him quite a bit.
Yeah, I saw it on LinkedIn. You're posting. You put that. Nice.
Yeah, he works with us, so that's fantastic, and he gets to travel sometime. He's been to Singapore and Philippines and Thailand with me so far for work. Not to Europe yet, but that'll be his next trip. But when the boys were little, it was more difficult. Now that it's older, it's a little easier to move around.
Well, time runs off. Top recommendation to travel. Top destination. Now that you
Top
would say.
things that you have to see. I would like to say that
Don't think too much and just name a few.
Maldives for sure. I would say Oman for sure. And again, these are recent experiences.
Yeah.
Southern California. No, I'm biased. Unfortunately, friends in Europe always go to New York. Friends in Asia always go to LA. There's so many better things to see, especially in San Diego, where I live. Those things off the top of my head. I mean, any of the great capitals of Europe are always worth a visit, right? For sure. My mother grew up in Sicily, so I have a place in my heart in Sicily where my mom is from.
Agrigento, Palermo,
Wow,
or
Modica.
which? Ah, nice. Okay.
Yeah, where the food is just abundanza. It's delicious. So yeah, that's my recommendation off the top
Perfect.
of my head.
Any hoteliers or GMs or persons that have influenced you or in the way you see the hospitality world?
Yes, Wayne Buckingham, semi-retired in Australia now, to be the regional VP for Starwood in Thailand. Charles Jack, currently the GM of the Westin in Tokyo. Torsten Richter in Berlin. Simone Deli's there in Vienna with you. Tino Linder, now at the JW in Frankfurt. Michael Jorgensen, currently at the Omni in Boston.
Wow.
Those are the ones that roll off the top of my head.
Any book recommendations?
Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. All the early books by Simon, I think, were great. I think later on, like all authors, they just start writing books. But some of his early books, I think, were really impactful. Leaders Eat Last is a great book that I recommend a lot. It's an easy read, and it puts a lot of these things about how to lead very much front of mind.
How do you train your emotion intelligence daily?
You know, every morning I get up, I accept that the day is a gift ahead, right? Make a difference, make a small difference with somebody. Have that lens on again of, am I developing trust with people? Am I demonstrating respect? You know, and you know, I like to use two words. You know, one is be gracious, and then the other one is be kind, actively, right? Sometimes we think kindness is the absence of rudeness, and it's not. That's back to that gray area. You know, just because you're not rude to somebody, it doesn't mean you're being kind. Some people think I'm crazy. When I go to the grocery store, I smile at people and say good morning, good afternoon. Sometimes they just look at me like I'm crazy, right? Sometimes I get a great smile and a good morning back, right? One
exercise to smile more, to not be like the concierge you said, like very serious.
Just do it, right? Just make an effort to do it, right? Just and put it in front of my. It's not natural to smile. It's natural to have this face, just a plain face. So remind yourself to smile, right? You know, make the world feel a little more comfortable, a little more welcoming, right? It's funny. I was on the streets of New York, just walking around saying good morning to people. Most of them looked at me like I was crazy, but some people did look back and say good morning, right? And don't let anybody else's misery make you miserable. Don't let anybody else's sour face give you a sour. Look, I get that every day is not a perfect day. The people that say every day is a Disney day, every day's perfect, again, those people are well medicated. I get it. I understand. But when you make it a conscious decision not to be miserable, you know, not to be ugly, right? You know, that's, I think, the foundation of emotional intelligence and self-management. Just because somebody's, you know, ugly to you, don't be ugly back, right? Like Dr. King said so well, it's my favorite quote by Dr. King, right? Right? You can't chase out darkness with more darkness. You need light to do that. Just like you can't chase out hate with more hate. You need love to do that, right? And if you make that simpler, you know, just if you're kind to people that maybe don't deserve your kindness, whether it's the barista at Starbucks, whether it's the person you pass on the street that's angry or miserable, if you still make an effort to be kind, I think your world's a better, richer place. And you set a better example for others. I think both my sons are both kind young men because of those examples they had set for them throughout their their formative years in the early part of their lives.
That was actually a very nice closing, but we still have 2 minutes and several questions.
Okay, go.
If you would have the opportunity to eat with somebody a very nice dinner at one of your top destinations, it doesn't matter if she or he would be dead or if he's alive now in the hospitality industry or not, who would you invite?
Wow. Boy, oh boy. And maybe he's front of mind just because I quoted him, but probably Dr. Martin Luther King.
What would you ask him, or what would you like to talk with him about?
How did you possibly maintain a approach of acceptance and kindness and love while only receiving so much hate and pain back? You know, how did you maintain that? Same would be the same question to Nelson Mandela, probably, or Gandhi.
Gandhi. Yeah.
The people that have endured so much and yet came forward with a message of love and peace, not a message of revenge and hate and burn, right? And where did it come from? Right? That's what I'd say. It's like, and like you asked me, how do you get up with that every day and bring that forward every day? Right? You know, because these were gentlemen in the purest sense of the word. They were gracious in the purest sense of the word. And I also, look, I understand and appreciate the anger from other people that wanted to reject and rage against those systems. So, and I'm not suggesting that turning the other cheek is always the right way to go. I just want to understand from these amazing leaders where that fire, that patience came
that
from.
will be the part of our next meeting, because we have only some seconds. Just your favorite value, and when will you be next in Vienna or in Austria?
My favorite value?
Yeah.
If I think about
when will you be next in Austria or in Vienna?
Got it. So I think one of my favorite values are top things that I value most. And I know it sounds preloaded as inspiration. It's like, how do we inspire people, right? And how do you inspire people, not just by doing something superhero-like or large? How do you inspire people every day? Doing simple things with simple approaches. Inspirational or being inspiring, I think, is one of my top values. And I will be back. I can't say it'll be Vienna specifically, but I will be back in Europe first quarter of 2024. So I'm looking forward to return.
Perfect.
Hope I meet you in person then, my friend.
Surely, you're invited to a coffee and a good Sacher cake. So
Outstanding.
when you're in Vienna, we will meet.
Schmeckt gut, ja? Delicious.
Du sprichst auch Deutsch. Das ist sehr gut. Ein bisschen.
Ein bisschen, ja.
Vielen Dank, Luis. And well, thank you so much for your time. And my mom is Mexican, so I'm often in Mexico.
Wow.
And San Diego is very close, so I'm sure.
Oh, if you ever get an opportunity to come visit, we would love to have you. We're 5 minutes from the border, my friend.
Wow.
We're right near the border.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
we'd love to host you.
Cool. Or if you are in Spain, France, or Austria, because I'm also moving a lot to France or Spain, Malaga, in the south of Spain. So if you are there, it's also beautiful. Fantastic. Now very hot, but amazing.
Brilliant. And fantastic, my friend. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Luis. We stay in touch.
Cheers. Tschüss.
Bye bye. Ciao. Tschüss. Schönen Abend.
Okay,